I have always maintained a close relationship with my two aunts, Aunt Laura and Aunt Monica. They were just a bit older than me, perhaps by a decade, and throughout my childhood, they felt more like older sisters than traditional aunts. Aunt Laura was bold, full of energy, and constantly brimming with ideas, while Aunt Monica, on the other hand, had a gentler, more caring nature and was always ready to listen to your concerns, offering support without judgment. They were inseparable, always appearing together at family gatherings, and I admired their closeness. One evening, after dinner at my mother's house, Aunt Laura casually suggested the idea of a weekend retreat for the three of us, herself, Aunt Monica, and me. She mentioned, while sipping her wine, that we rarely spent time together just as a trio. Her tone was light-hearted, but the way she said it caught my attention. Aunt Monica looked up suddenly, seemingly skeptical of the idea, but said nothing, leaving only the three of us. I laughed nervously and asked, "Why not invite everyone else?" "That's the point," Aunt Laura replied with a smile, signaling that it was meant to be just the three of us for some quality time. The idea felt strange, as I couldn't remember a time when the three of us had done anything like that before. Family outings usually included everyone. This sudden exclusivity seemed odd, but after a moment of hesitation, Aunt Monica reluctantly agreed, suggesting it might be nice. Despite my concerns, I realized they were family, and I had no real reason to turn it down. Aunt Laura's enthusiasm was infectious, and Aunt Monica seemed genuinely positive as we finalized the plans. Still, I noticed small details that made me uneasy, whispers between them and shared glances full of unspoken meaning. I brushed it off, convincing myself that I was overthinking things. In the days leading up to the trip, I felt a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. I tried to push away the persistent sense of unease, telling myself it was just a weekend, nothing more. Yet, there were moments when I caught Aunt Monica looking at me with a look I couldn't fully understand. Part guilt, part sadness. Aunt Laura, on the other hand, was as lively as ever, acting as if this trip was nothing out of the ordinary. When the day finally came, they picked me up early in the morning. Aunt Laura drove energetically, excitedly discussing all the things we could do, while Aunt Monica sat quietly in the passenger seat. I tried to match their enthusiasm, but something about the whole situation felt off, though I couldn't pinpoint why. As we drove toward our destination, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a family outing. There was something awaiting me at the end of the trip, and I wasn't prepared for it. The drive was uneventful, but the place we arrived at was anything but ordinary. We reached a secluded cabin deep in the woods, surrounded by tall trees and complete solitude. It was picturesque, almost unreal, but the isolation made me uneasy. Aunt Laura unlocked the door and ushered me in with a cheerful smile, while Aunt Monica hesitated, her eyes nervously scanning the surroundings. Although the cabin was cozy and surprisingly luxurious, with a large stone fireplace, plush furniture, and wide windows letting in the soft afternoon light, the quiet was unsettling. Aunt Laura immediately started unpacking, humming to herself, while Aunt Monica moved into the kitchen, avoiding eye contact. I stood there awkwardly, unsure of what to do, feeling like an outsider on what was supposed to be a bonding trip. By evening, the mood had shifted. Aunt Laura opened a bottle of wine and poured it generously, encouraging us to relax. "This is supposed to be fun," she said, raising her glass in a toast. "Here's to family and new experiences." Aunt Monica hesitated before clinking her glass with ours, her smile thin and forced. As we drank, Aunt Laura became more animated, sharing stories from her youth, exciting tales I had never heard before. It was surprising and a little unsettling to hear her speak so openly. Aunt Monica seemed more and more uncomfortable, her glances at me becoming more frequent and apologetic. Then, Aunt Laura leaned forward and changed her tone, her voice quieter. "Monica and I talked, and we thought this trip could be an opportunity for—" She trailed off. "For what?" I asked, sensing a shift in the evening's atmosphere. Her eyes gleamed with an unreadable emotion. Aunt Monica reached out toward her sister's arm, as if trying to stop her. But Aunt Laura urged us to step outside our comfort zones and try something new together. Her words hung in the air, vague and unclear. I struggled to make sense of what she meant, but Aunt Monica's face had gone pale, her lips pressed tightly together. "Perhaps we should tell her, Monica," Aunt Laura said firmly, cutting off the growing tension. Aunt Monica stared at me, her eyes full of shame and desperation. "We need to tell you something personal," she said, her voice breaking the silence and increasing my unease. Aunt Laura leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine with a content smile, while Aunt Monica seemed on the verge of tears. I felt trapped, weighed down by their unspoken words, unsure whether I should leave or stay and wait for them to explain. The silence stretched on, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the soft sound of wind outside. It became clear that this weekend was going to be far from ordinary. Something deeper was unfolding. Eventually, I could stand it no longer. "What are you trying to tell me? Just say it," I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. Aunt Monica recoiled, gripping the edge of the table, while Aunt Laura stayed calm, almost amused by my frustration. Aunt Monica spoke softly. "It's not that simple." Aunt Laura cut in confidently. "We've held back for too long. It's time for you to understand." She paused before continuing. "We want to offer you something different, something that could strengthen our family bond." Their words were full of implications, and I felt the weight of what they were suggesting. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart racing. Aunt Monica finally lifted her head, her eyes wet with unshed tears. "We've never been able to be ourselves even around family," she said quietly. "We thought you might understand." Her words hung in the air and I felt my confusion deepen. "Understand what?" I asked, my voice shaky. Aunt Laura leaned forward, her tone serious. "We want to challenge the norms that separate us. We want to redefine what family means and invite you to join us." I felt the room spin, and I gripped my chair to steady myself. Their words were full of hidden meanings, and I could no longer ignore them. "This isn't normal," I whispered. "Whatever you're suggesting is wrong." Aunt Laura's demeanour shifted to one of intensity. "Who decides what's normal? Why should we follow society's rules when we could create something better for ourselves?" "Enough, Laura," Aunt Monica interjected firmly, her voice trembling. "This isn't what we agreed to. We wanted to talk, not pressure you." "I'm not pressuring you," Aunt Laura replied calmly. "I'm offering you a chance at freedom." I stood up, my legs weak beneath me. "This isn't freedom, it's manipulation. I don't want anything you're trying to convince me of." Aunt Monica's voice pleaded, "Please, just listen." "We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought you'd understand." I shook my head in disbelief. "I don't understand, and I don't want to." The room felt suffocating as their eyes bore into me. I couldn't comprehend how we had gone from a simple family trip to this. Whatever they were asking of me, I couldn't give it to them, now or ever. The next morning I woke up exhausted. Sleep had been impossible, my mind replaying everything from the night before. The cabin, once inviting, now felt oppressive. I could hear faint sounds from the living room, but I stayed in bed for a while, gathering my thoughts. It was clear that no matter what we had shared before, the conversation we needed to have was unavoidable. When I finally got up, both aunts were sitting at the dining table, their faces full of emotion. Aunt Monica looked drained, her eyes swollen or avoiding mine, while Aunt Laura seemed composed but with a gentler, almost regretful expression. "We need to talk," Aunt Monica said softly, breaking the silence. I nodded but stayed standing. "I don't know how to begin," I replied, my frustration creeping in. "What you said last night crossed a line." Aunt Laura leaned back in her chair, her usual confidence shaken. "We didn't mean to upset you," she said calmly. "We thought this trip would give us a chance to address a long-standing issue. We clearly misjudged you." "You're right," I said, cutting her off. "Whatever you're dealing with doesn't involve me in this way." Aunt Monica's head snapped up. "You're right. she said, her voice firm despite the tears. This should have been handled differently. I should have stopped it before it went this far. Aunt Laura exchanged a quick look with her sister, a frown on her face, but she didn't argue. Instead, she sighed and looked at me. We recognize now that we pushed too hard and overstepped. If you need space, take it. We never meant to hurt you. I stayed silent for a moment, the weight of their words pressing down on me. I think I should go home early, I finally said, my voice cold. Neither of them tried to stop me. Aunt Monica nodded, tears silently falling down her face, while Aunt Laura looked away, her jaw clenched. I packed my things and stepped out into the cold morning air. A mixture of relief and sorrow washed over me. The bond I had once cherished with my aunts felt shattered, perhaps beyond repair. I wasn't sure if time would heal the situation or if things could go back to how they were, but it was clear that some boundaries, once crossed, cannot be undone, and sometimes the only way forward is to walk away.